Hello there and welcome to this webinar. We're going to be looking today at how we can build apps faster and with less code using RAD Studio Architect Edition. So I'll say welcome to the webinar. My name's Stephen Ball and I'm the Pre-Sales Director here at Embarcadero. And joining me on the call today is Mary Kelly. Hi Mary.
Hello.
And also Alex Ruiz.
Hi Stephen.
Hey. So today we're going to be having a look at a typical scenario that we're hearing quite a bit of recently, and that scenario is that with COVID, there's a lot of companies now looking at how they can get their data shared out and available easily for remote teams to work with. So we're going to explore some of the really useful tools that can help developers do that in a much more cohesive and simpler manner, and also some of the extras that you kind of get above the Enterprise Edition that just means that you can develop quicker, you can document some of these things a lot quicker and get them shared out a lot faster. So our journey today, we've set the scene. We're going to kick off by having a look at how we can get clarity around the data that we're trying to move out, and you often find this at the start of a project. And Mary's going to be taking us through some of the Aqua Data Studio side of things there. And then we're going to look at, once we've got a clear picture of the data and what we're trying to do with that data, we'll then move on to trying to get that data out and enabled for remote access, because one of the big challenges first and foremost is making sure we can access that anywhere, especially when we have remote teams. And Alex is going to take us through looking at setting that up and making that accessible remotely, and then also looking at mobile and web or desktop UIs to connect to that data and make it simple to consume remotely. So once we've been through those, Mary's going to come back and talk to us about how we can do some of the Windows UI testing that might be part of this kind of project, or also could be web testing. And then we'll kind of finish off and we'll have a chat through some of the tools, take your questions. If you're watching this live, please go ahead and use the Q&A log. If not, then please feel free to email one of us and we'll be more than happy to respond to one of your questions if it's not answered in the Q&A log at the end. So I think, who's up first? Is it you, Mary?
Yes, hello.
Okay, so let's get on and have a look at some of the Aqua Data Studio.
Yeah. Aqua Data Studio is a database IDE for anyone who wants to work with data, whether you're an application developer, a data analyst, DBA, or some combination mix of that. It's a productivity tool designed to provide you with the ability to develop, access, manage, and visually analyze data in a quick and easy to use environment. Now, for application developers, it contains a lot of features that are both new and also expand upon what we already see in RAD Studio. In this demo, we're going to focus on some of the higher level things, the ER modeling, query building, and data visualization aspects of ADS. To get us started with using the Aqua IDE, we're going to need to connect to the Interbase database employee. So I already have an employee example here, but to go through the registration and get started, we can click on Register Server. And with ADS, you have a multitude of different databases that you can connect to. Everything from relational SQL to NoSQL and cloud databases as well. So we'll go through and click on Interbase, type in the name, we can say employee, and we'll just put IB. Set the type of database as well, so it might be production, it might be development, or test, which database you are specifically connecting to. Choose the tab color here so you can change it to any color that you want, and also the tab format as well. For authentication, this is just going to be the username and password that you have. If you're using Interbase, it'll just be the sysdba or your specific username, and the password. You'll include your host, 127.001, and the port number I'm working with is 3051, and my database is just going to be listed as the employee.gdb database. Now you can also choose to create a database as well. We will go ahead and test the connection. You've successfully connected to your database. Save that. Now, all databases show up here in the data tree on the left-hand side, where we can see the different object types and explore the database, the security areas as well. You can open up the object editors to also create or alter any objects. One of the main features of any IDE that you work with is going to, of course, be the code editor. So we can write out the SQL queries. Now, even experienced SQL developers can find fault in their queries, so whether you're newer and feel less confident with SQL syntax or even have been using it for quite a while, there's a great option, another main menu tool here called Query Builder. Like many other database IDEs, Query Builder is going to allow you to drag and drop queries together by simply taking fields and building out that SQL syntax that you can take and even then copy into FD query, for instance. Now I have a sample query here that just looks at the name, department, and salary, uses joins and a subquery as well, and I have an example of this already pre-built in Query Builder. All I've had to do is just look at within the tables, dragging the fields over into my select statement, adding a where clause here, creating a subquery, which can be very easily done by just getting this editor where I can then say, all right, let's add a subquery. It can create a new subquery or also use a subquery additionally for nested queries, setting it to a value or again a subquery, and then having filter logic and run this query. And you can also go through to check on the messages as well. And now the data we can see is specifically ordered by salary and department. Now this isn't all that the Query Builder can do. Now beyond just viewing data here, you can also export the data as well. So you can choose to view it as a spreadsheet or even email it as an Excel attachment. So your data will be listed out with specific columns and also have the field titles as well listed out. Another feature that you can get to from within the Query Builder tab is to utilize visual analytics. Now, visual analytics lets you analyze data with that familiar drag and drop interface. You can pull your query results directly into worksheets to create more engaging visualizations of your data. Now we'll go ahead and just create a brand new visual analytics. And as you can see, it allows you to go through, connect to multiple data sets where you can then see any SQL statement that's currently running against your system. So you can pull in these tabs specifically. Now I already have another example available where I'm just looking at each of the departments with what the sum of the salary is based on those departments specifically. You can even go as far as to create a filled map of the data. So in this case, I am looking at specific data points for the location of my customers, and I can go through and look at the data. So in this case, there's only one customer there, but I can view that data. Now the listing here, the country, city, and state, these can all be changed based off the filters that we place from our dimensions. So we can remove that and then even go through and add the number of records. So as I look at Dallas, we can then see how many records I have. And it's a very easy, simple to change process that then when I take that over to a dashboard, I can then click on that value and I can keep that value updated as quickly as possible. Now I can go through visual analytics, take a look at some of the visualizations, and I think we have over 30 or so different templates that are available with different functions, specific visualizations that you want. In this case, I have employees hired in 2010, but you can then also see that the chart properties can also be changed. So if I'm looking for a table instead, we can then see what the sum of those values are. in a listed out fashion or visual representation that you would like. So the ER modeler is a main menu item for Aqua Data Studio. Now you can generate or open a current model, so reverse engineering an existing database, or you can use new to forward engineer. And then there are a few ways you can get started with the ER modeler, either here at the main menu or by going to your database and just right-clicking, going to Tools, and also use the ER diagram generator. By right-clicking, ADS already knows what database I'm working with, so it just takes me directly to the ER diagram wizard for this database. I can click on the views and the tables as well, and then it gives me a few options. I'm going to include indices, and it'll also include constraints as well. Clicking next, it generates now this nice floating window for my complete picture of my database and the tables and relationships currently set. Now ADS also has the typical navigation features that you would expect. It's got the zooming in and out. You can go up to tools and you can generate a script and HTML reports, compare with a database or model, or even import or export the model itself. I can double click and get details on the structure of the table to get a better understanding of the entities. Also viewing the DDL as well, so I can really drill down into the table and get a far better understanding. Now, the ER modeler, the query builder, and the visual analytics tools are all pop-out windows of the main IDE. So you can open, alter, create, save, refresh anything within these tools, and it allows you then to keep up your productivity and to always stay current with your data.
All right, thank you, Mary. That gives us a really good idea on how to look at the data. Now let's try to get that exposed. Let's push that into a REST web service with RAD Server. We're going to look at how to look at it from a mobile, desktop, or a web view. Okay, so let's get started with our demo. I am going to create a new RAD server package. This RAD server package is going to be serving some data from a local database, an interbase database, the employees database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new package with a resource. Here we are going to create a resource name that is called RAD demo. This is demo that I do very often, so chances are a lot of the things that I have here are already pre-populated. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want a data module for my resource. And in here, I'm actually going to deselect pretty much everything except for the database endpoints. That is actually what's going to help us do a very, very quick demo. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to use a very recent feature that we have in RAD Server that allows us to automatically create endpoints for objects in a table. So I'm going to do database endpoints, hit next, and in here we are going to connect to the employee database. I already have username and password right here. This is an interbase database, and we can select a couple of the objects that we have here. Basically, right here we have all of these are tables, I believe, but you could connect also to views or other things that you may have in your database. So I'm going to select customer and employee, and I'm going to hit finish, and that's it. The server has been created. This automatically creates endpoints for your database where you can do multiple operations, or you can basically do all of these actions automatically. You can do the list, get, post, put, and delete actions for this query. So basically, this is actually an FD query. Let me open it. It's basically a select star from customer from customers. You can parameterize your query. You can do a lot of really cool things with this component, the TEMS dataset resource. You can do page sizes, or you can modify the page size. You can do parameters, and you can do many things with this component. Basically, what it does, it is going to take a data set and it's going to give you the actions to respond to the HTTP REST verbs, and it's going to convert your data set into JSON objects. So I'm going to start this application. This is going to open the development version of RAD Server. I'm going to hit open browser, and that's it. That is the server running. But if we want to get some data, we can get it by checking this, and that's it. That's our server running. It is very fast. It is way faster than any other thing that you might find out there, like scaffolding, or even, I don't know, like entity framework, or any other type of server endpoint, automatic endpoint creation. This basically, you saw no code. Is very quick. I'm actually going to change this from localhost to my local IP address, so we can check this out from another device. I have a tablet right here that we can use in order to do a multi-device test. Okay, so I'm just going to minimize this. I am going to minimize my browser. Oh, this, by the way, like I told you, this responds already to the different actions. So I could actually connect using, I don't know, Postman, and I could test other methods. I could do a post to update my database automatically. This is going to be handled by the EMS dataset resource. I could do a delete. I could just select an individual item right here. Let's see, 1002, and it's going to get only this this item right here. Again, you can debug it using something like Postman if you wish. But what we're going to do is we're going to start creating clients. The first client that I'm going to create, it's a multi-device client. I'm just going to do blank application, and this basically can run in any of these platforms. I'm going to run it on an Android tablet just because that's what I have right here ready for you to see. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to the REST debugger. Like I was telling you, this is a tool that allows us to connect and run different methods, sort of like Postman. But let me show you something really cool that this application does. I already have actually right here this prepared. This is a demo, like I said, that I run very often, just to show our customers how to go from a two-tier application or client server application into a multi-tier, just with very few changes and very easily with RAD Server. Okay, so my requests are right here. My parameters are right here. I'm going to send a request, and that is going to return this already in a tabular format. I can also look at the body, but I'm going to select tabular data, hit copy components, and from here, that is going to copy all of the components that I would need in order to create a client. What components are those? It's a client. This has basically the URL. Request that has the resource. Where's the resource? Right here, customer. Response, that it's going to receive the response from our server. A component that it's going to take that response and turn it into a data set, and a data set to receive that data. So this REST response dataset adapter is basically the opposite of this guy, the EMS dataset resource. Not quite, but it's going to give you, it's going to turn the data that I was showing you into a data set that you can easily manipulate. So right now we're going to dump that data into a mem table. And let's put a couple of components. Let's do a string grid. Let's do a, what else? What else? A toolbar. Let's do a button and a navigator. Okay, so we have a couple of components right there. I'm going to use some of the things that you may have seen on the recent versions of Delphi. The first one, and one of my favorite is, well, this is not that recent, but, well, visual live bindings. This is really cool because it's going to allow us to take the data from this mem table and put it in this string grid. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to execute this request, and that is going to fill basically our mem table. Let's put all of that in here. Let's see, let me do something really quick. Let's do the columns editor, add all of the columns, and let's set the width to something smaller. Let's do 20. Okay, that's good enough. And then I am going to do a quick edit, do an alignment of client so that our application looks good in our tablet. This, we're going to do a quick edit and align it to this side. This, we're going to align to client as well. And what else are we going to do here? Let's do a refresh here. Where's my style? Let's look for something that looks like a refresh or a play or, okay, this is good enough. Okay, so I'm actually going to write some code, and that is to run the REST request dot execute. And that's it. That's all of the code that I'm going to need. That's basically what I did here on the request, so that we can actually, request this data at runtime. I almost forgot. Let's bind this as well. The binding navigator, we are going to bind it to our table so that we have this ready. Okay, so let's run this application in Windows. Let's see how it looks. And we have our application right here. We run it. Okay, it gives us all of this data. And yep, everything works. Now now what we can do is actually we can run this against any of these platforms. So that is already a multi-device application. Let's do a quick run against this little tablet that we have here. And I think that's pretty much it. I am going to hit run. All right, so the application is getting installed. Let's switch to the device. There it is, and wait for this to start running. Okay, application is running. We have our little app here. It's ready. Let's hit the refresh button, and voila. We have all of the data right here. Same data, same thing that you saw on the Windows version. This is actually pretty cool because it allows us to do multi-platform. As you know, that's one of the huge advantages of Delphi. But now let's look at one of the big advantages of the Architect Edition. That includes Sencha. Sencha has something that for Delphi developers is a great tool. It uses a very similar pattern or model that what Delphi has accustomed us to, right? So that is Sencha Architect. I'm going to start a new project. I am going to do, you basically have two frameworks, the modern framework, which is more geared to modern browsers, mobile devices and stuff like that, and classic. This is more geared towards, I'm not going to say legacy browsers, but it is more, it has more of a desktop in mind, although it can also do mobile, which I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to go with the classic framework. I'm going to create a new project. Again, very, very similar to what we're used to in Delphi. We can drag and drop. We can look at code, edit code, do visual designs. So it is like a very natural way of creating web applications for us Delphi developers. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to create I'm going to use the data UI builder, and this is also very cool because it allows us to connect directly my to my RAD server. I'm going to copy the same URL. Let's paste it in here. Similar to the REST debugger, I am going to be able to import the fields. Once I have the fields, it detects pretty much everything from here, and I'm going to say generate. And that's it. I have a web version that I can use from any device. Where is it? Here. It's under the views. So right here, what we have is pretty much the same thing. I have a panel with a grid that it's going to allow me to browse this data set. And if I want to, I can also edit, add, save, or delete from this. So it gives me a full client that I am going to be able to run pretty much from anywhere. I am going to save and build this. Let me just give it a name. Say project RAD Server Demo. My app is fine. I'm gonna hit save. There you go. And now we can build this application to a test environment, and let's run it. Okay, the build has completed, and let's look at it. Preview. As you can see, we have here this data. I can edit one of these fields. I can add a new one. I can actually delete one of these. And that's basically it. That's multiple platforms. As you can see right now, I have a Windows application, a Android application. I could run this on iOS, Mac, or Linux, all of them native clients, and I can also use this actually basically this web application from any other platform that I wanted to run. Okay, so that's it for the demo.
Thanks, Alex. That was a great presentation on specifically using RAD Server with Sencha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought the pulling in the web service through the single line of code and having the data model built up so quickly was, phenomenal. It's a very rad way to get out onto the web and also have modern JavaScript for web available and enabled for a web team to pick up and expand on as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's one of my favorite demos. I really get excited on how easy it is to, take data from even from an existing database, from an existing customers database, publishing it in under a minute, and then consuming it from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about RAD Server as well is that it's a completely open standard. It's what the world of web services and microservices is built upon. Having all the analytics and the other kind of things in the back of RAD Server as well, being able to see what's been called and when, and it can bring a whole new dimension to the way an understanding about the way that companies' data is being accessed and used, which is great for kind of maintenance, but also for future development work and ideas around what to build first and next. But also, it's completely open to any programming language. So it doesn't matter if you're building something in .NET, in Java, in Python, in Ruby, in PHP, in RAD Server, or in Delphi or C++ Builder. You've got direct access into that data, in a very uniform way, which is pretty cool.
Definitely.
Okay, so I think just to finish off our sessions today, one of the key things we have to look around is if you're having to make adjustments to existing desktop applications, to move those out and to have them available remotely. And I think, Mary, you're going to take us through what you can do with Ranorex there for the UI testing, right?
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at using Ranorex Studio to do some of that automated UI testing. Now, a special feature to Interbase specifically is change views, and it basically looks at a way that you can refresh that data. So looking at what data has changed since you last looked at a database. And we're going to kind of go through a sample application and just show you the way that you can actually automate the testing process for a UI to see how important it actually is to do UI testing.
Sounds good.
One of the questions I get quite often is, what is Ranorex Studio? Well, Ranorex is a GUI or UI test automation framework that supports Delphi and C++ Builder VCL applications. It has a full set of tools for easy to create, no-code UI automation. So you can build out automated GUI test routines for your Delphi and C++ Builder applications and focus on getting your applications ready for delivery rather than on testing and retesting. Now, one of the reasons why this is so important, this test automation process, is that a lot of testing is still fairly manual. So some of the benefits to Ranorex, which as RAD developers we all love, is that you can cover a multitude of complex scenarios. So you can get faster feedback, you can reduce costs in a lot of cases, and can spend more time developing your product features. Now we'll walk through the process of utilizing Ranorex as well as a Delphi application that I already have up and running. So I currently have an IB change view application here in my IDE. Now when I open the database connection, I'll have a listing of details from a sub-database listed out in this grid. And as I make changes, I'll be able to see the change view and then also merge that data into the database itself. Now we can go into Ranorex Studio, and all I've done here is opened a new solution via the wizard. I'll click on Desktop Applications. Now Ranorex does allow you to build out mobile and web applications as well. So if you're using Sencha Ext JS, you can utilize Ranorex as well for those web applications. We'll go ahead and create a test called change views proj, and we'll go ahead and move this to a new file directory, and we'll click continue. Now you're going to look specifically for the application that you're wanting. So based on the processes, I can click on the IB change view, click continue, and then also choose between a focus on a single application or multiple applications. In this case, I only have one application, so I'll focus on a single one and click finish. And the solution will now be created in Ranorex Studio. When you're working with Ranorex Studio, you have a project manager and you also have tutorials as well. When you create your first project with Ranorex Studio, so this editor right here is your test suite. When you create a test case, you have a startup, so go starting up the application, recording each of the steps, and then also closing or tearing down the application. Now I'll go ahead and double click on recording one, and I now have my repository as well as my action menus. So I could either go and click and add a new action specifically if I know what those actions are, or I can start recording. By clicking record, it opens up the application and it opens up Ranorex Recorder. Now this Ranorex Recorder, as soon as I start implementing actions in my application, it's going to start recording them. So I click Open DB, and you can see I have a mouse left click. I can click on the grid. If I add a down arrow, I can say, let's make some changes to the data here. We'll use change views. I'll click a down arrow, and as you can see, my change view is now reported under the change view. Now I can go to merge delta. I'll go ahead and merge that data as well as committing the data to the database. And as I went through each of those actions, it went through and recorded each of them. So now I can click stop, and it now imports or brings all of those actions into Ranorex Studio. So now that I have seen what the actions are, each action is some action against a repository item. So in this case, as my application says here, my button is actually called button OpenDB, as it's also labeled here as a repository item. So Ranorex knows that my VCL application has a button that is named button OpenDB. So it will just record each of those actions in Ranorex. You can go ahead and choose Run Recording, and the recording will open the application, make the changes automatically for me, and commit any changes or any data updates. As soon as the recording has completed, it will then create a log that not only says all of the endpoints, the operating system that I'm testing against, and any additional details relating to the recording, but it will also list out any warnings that it found, any errors. So if the test fails, I will also see all of those details as well. Clicking with the mouse on the item, specifically OpenDB, making a change to the original grid by adding the word change view to it with the different sequences, going through each of those actions until it completes the test case. Now there's far more that we can do with Ranorex beyond what I've shown you here today with a simple test case, such as more complex and longer test cases. You also have integration with TestRail as well as Jira, even Jenkins, and beyond that with source control and additional options as well.
Thanks, Mary. That was pretty cool. The Ranorex stuff really is quite powerful, especially with that scripting engine over there. Okay, so I think we're pretty much at the end of our little journey here, being able to kind of pick up some data and get it exposed out and see some of the tools that we could use along the way. Just to finish off before we have our Q&A here, I just wanted to share quickly with you the differences between the different product editions of RAD Studio. So a couple of things to highlight here. Mary's mentioned obviously change views within the last demo. Change views is part of the interface to go and the interface server, and as part of the Architect edition you get the interface to go mobile deployment, which is runtime royalty free as well. So if you wanted to have that capability within a mobile application, you can get that IoT award-winning feature as part of the Architect edition. In addition, the RAD server that we had a look at earlier in the session from Alex, if you just have a single server set up, or kind of a single head office where your servers are spaced, then you can use the enterprise license for RAD Server for that. But if you're deploying out to multiple different locations and you need to install and run RAD Server there, then the Architect edition actually includes a multi-site, multi-server license as part of the Architect edition. So buying either Enterprise or Architect specifically for the RAD Server deployment is actually cheaper than buying the licenses traditionally, in the old way. So it really is a pretty awesome bundle to be in there. Mm-hmm. The additional things we've had a look at today, obviously Aqua Data Studio, the Sencha Architect, which Alex demoed, and then the Ranorex, which Mary showed at the end, are all part of the Architect edition. So hopefully you've now got the flavour for how much faster you can develop and get your team ready and moving forward, even if it's just with a single Architect license within your team. It's certainly something that's worth having a look at. At the point that we're recording this webinar, December 2020, then we have a special promotion that's running at the moment where you can get the Architect edition for the price of Enterprise. So if you're looking at the moment, it's an absolute no-brainer to literally max up and use these extra tools and have them available at your disposal by getting the Architect Edition. So I think that's it from us and the team. Mary, Alex, any more you want to add before we jump into the Q&A?
Well, I would just like to point out that, like you said, the offer that we have right now is really great, especially because of the Sencha license. Usually, Sencha licenses are sold in a bundle, so having it as part of Delphi is a very inexpensive way to get those licenses. So, yeah, it's a great thing to take advantage of right now.
Cool. Okay, great. Time for the Q&A. Okay, just going to put my webcam on so you can see me as well. Hopefully that's popping up. Hey, and there's Alex as well. Oh, need to take my cover off. That might help. There we are.
All right.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you guys. There's a few questions coming through into the question panel already, and we'll do our best to get through those in the chat. Just before we get into that, I do have one quick poll which I want to share. I need to just stop sharing the video. Hold on. And there we are. So it's just a very quick question in terms of what's the latest version of Delphi or C++ Builder that you're using. So if you're on Delphi 7 or before, then we've got the 2007 or earlier, which is the pre-Unicode. If you've made the jump to Unicode 2009 up to XE, and then log yourself in there. If you've made the jump to 64-bit Windows on XE2 all the way up to XE8, then there's the option for that there. And then obviously if you're on one of the more recent versions, 10 point something, then please kind of put down there which versions you're currently running on. And so more and more we're seeing a lot of people now on the latest versions, which is really, really cool. Some really good innovation coming through and being able to get into the latest versions as well with all the updates that are happening around Windows and especially Windows 10 with the high API support and the Windows Store support and the new Edge browser that's just kind of come through. And a number of times, RAD Studio is first to market with support for those new technologies from Microsoft, and also has the best coverage of the kind of the Windows API and the WinRT, and and the shell that any tool out there has. So it's that's pretty cool. Okay, so almost half of you voted now. I'll give it just a few more seconds for you to finish off through voting on there. So just whilst we've got that up, any questions from the chat list there that you want to pick up, Mary or Alex?
Yes, there is one question from Joseph. He is asking about the REST response dataset adapter. I believe he has two datasets that are coming back on a JSON response. Basically, what you can do is you can pick the top element on the response to be able to dump that into a mem table, or you can send it to a client dataset or any other data set that you might want. Automatically, the REST debugger, the way I did the copying of the components, that takes everything, but you can also, again, switch it to the top element that you want to turn into a data set.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. The way the dataset adapter works, as you say, setting the root node, you can actually have multiple dataset adapters off the response. So when the response comes back through, you might have one that gives you the the total number of records, which page of data you've got, and some summary information from it. Then you might have the kind of core record for the customer, and then an actual record for the JSON for the address that's in there, and you can actually set them all up, and you can actually have them working in unison. So as you navigate through the data set, the nodes then kind of pick up and respond through. And I've done that on a couple of mobile apps where I've been using a third-party REST API that's not written using RAD Server, and the data structures just seamlessly pull through really nicely.
Right.
And being able to access it at design time as well in the IDE is just phenomenal. So
It
it
is. It
makes
is
makes the prototyping so much quicker and easier.
true.
Cool. So Mary, there's a question here about different database support within Aqua Data Studio, and specifically looking at Firebird. But do you want to just share a little bit more about the different DB supports? I think you might be muted.
I am indeed.
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. So right now, we support just over about 35 or so different databases between SQL, NoSQL, cloud-based databases, including Snowflake as well. Currently, Firebird is supported through JDBC. So if you are interested in working with Firebird at this time, at least, you can use the JDBC driver that's included with that. But yes, like I said, overall, you can connect to SQL Server, you can connect to Oracle, DB2, really even Azure and AWS instances as well. So really, whatever databases that are out there that you're working with, you can connect to and work with and visualize your data with Aqua Data Studio.
Yeah, no, it's a very very good tool. Okay. Ansel was just saying he's having problems with the audio earlier. If you want to rewatch this, then give it a couple of hours after the webinar's finished. You can just re-register and it'll take you through, and you'll be able to pick up the replay then. And I'm sure it'll be up on the Embarcadero YouTube channel in a few days as well. So sorry if you've had a bit of problem with the audio, but I say we try to, at the moment, especially with so many people working remotely, and we're pre-recording some of the core parts to be able to play, which enables us to do the live Q&A at the same time, but also just to try and protect the audio. So, okay, question here from Michael. If I've already got Architect, do I get access to Sencha? So yeah, when you purchase through, you'll get a separate email through with the license key. If you haven't seen that, then just reach out to your sales rep, and they'll be able to connect you up and make sure that you're all sorted. So question here from Andre asking about the RAD Server Architect license. How do I install it? So Alex, do you want to take that one?
Yes, of course. So the installation for RAD Server, actually, in one of the most recent versions of Delphi, you can get it from Get and it's a great way. It's a great package that you can install. So it makes the deployment of RAD Server quite easy. We have installers for Linux. We have installers for Windows, and you can also find it in Docker Hub. So you can actually, just get a Docker image, deploy it into any cloud server that you might have, or any cloud infrastructure that you might have, and you would be able to install it that way. Now, the license is included with the purchase of Delphi. There are some differences on the license that you get and the capabilities of each license. For example, in the enterprise version, there is a single site license included, and Architect allows a multi-site license, or a multi-site deployment, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think the having the Docker support really makes it so much nicer to be able to kind of deploy out and get going, especially if you're doing, or backend server, unless you're doing anything that's Windows specific in the API calls that you're making. The rest of the code is all cross-platform anyway, so being able to run it onto Linux as a backend is very, very handy and
Right.
great for testing and development, and then having the same stuff to move to production. It's the DevOps way of doing things, and works really, really well. And I've also been playing around with that with the Docker technologies for spinning up different database backends for testing different database connectivities. So many databases now are available through Docker images as well, which is pretty cool.
Right.
So if you're interested in the kind of the Docker side of things and the setup and configuration, definitely worth Googling Malcolm Groves' session that he did on an introduction to Docker. It is a real 101 session, about an hour and a half, I think it went on for, but taking you into the basics and the foundations of getting up and going with Docker. But once you kind of pick that up, that's a fantastic way to be able to deploy out RAD Server. And the licensing, one of the kind of common questions we get asked around it is the licenses for the license server part of the RAD server. So you install that onto a single instance and get that up and running, but you can then have multiple servers as the front ends to your back end, if that makes sense. So you can spin up 5, 6, 7 web servers feeding the requests coming in and out, and all have them managed off the one interface powered RAD server license.
Right.
That does allow multiple servers at the same site, which is pretty cool.
Right. There is a follow-up question from Joseph about the multiple data sets. I would like to take that one.
Sure, go ahead.
Joseph, basically what Stephen was saying is that from one response, you can have multiple data set adapters that will dump the data into multiple mem tables. So that is possible. You can populate as many data sets as you want from one response.
Okay, cool. So a question from Peter asking about where he can see the Docker images of RAD for Delphi Architect. So if you just search for the Docker images for the RAD server aspect. So if you just search RAD server Docker, I think Marco Cantu did a blog post on the images when they're released.
Right.
So they're pretty straightforward to get hold of. I can't remember if you mentioned earlier, Alex, as well, that as part of the installation, if you're just installing it onto IIS, then you can go into Get It, and there's a package that you can download, which you can then put up onto your hosted machine, or if it's a Windows server, for example, and you can run that, and that will then pre-configure IIS with all the application pools and all the other kind of bits that it needs for getting it ready. It will deploy up the basic BPLs that are required for getting it going as well. And the other trick that's really quite useful is PA Server. If you're building anything and you want to distribute it directly from your IDE over to your distribution machine, be it Linux or Windows, you can just use PA Server, install that onto the remote machine, and hit the deploy button directly from your local server, from your dev machine, sorry. And then that will pick up any BPLs that are required for the project, and we'll deploy them up as well. So it's a very quick way of working out, if there's any extra files that you need to be able to deploy out to do that.
Right. Yeah, and the installation for RAD Server, you only have to worry about it once. Once it's mounted on top of IIS, deploying the additional EMS packages is quite easy.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Peter was asking about if it's going to be possible to get a Docker image of the Delphi IDE. It's a slightly more complex product to set up and package out that way, but certainly, we'll pass it back through to product management. If there's specifics around kind of your use case and your requirements, that would be great to have pushed over. Certainly, what I'd say, I know a lot of the team here now use VMs. I have a base Windows 10 VM with some basic bits installed. And then I just make a copy of that anytime I need a new version of Delphi, and I install onto that. So that allows me to kind of install different beta versions and to run kind of different versions isolated. quite well. And then using shared drives on the host machine, it's very easy to kind of move code around and do stuff. And certainly with source code control, very, very easy to kind of pull code directly into the VM as well, if you'd rather kind of go that route, or if you have stuff that requires a local compilation. So. Okay. Yeah, Gordon here saying he's using 10.3.2, but didn't know much about RAD Server, so that's been pretty useful for him, which is good. A few comments about Aqua Data Studio looking very cool and quite a useful tool to have in the box for them. Yeah, I certainly, working with Mary, the more if I get on, at least once a week, I'm hearing, well, I used Aqua Data Studio to solve this week with some database stuff we're doing with a customer. So yeah, it's a great productivity tool for that.
Yeah, especially if, like I mentioned in the video, if you're not as familiar with SQL, or even if you do and you're wanting to optimize that SQL, you can actually take that code, copy and paste it directly into FireDAC, the query editor, and still be able to use queries, just execute a query directly from within RAD Studio. So it really does kind of simplify that process, really make it so that you can develop your applications a lot faster and get connecting to data as quickly as possible, and also just again see what you're actually doing, so you can make more sense of the queries that you're writing.
Yeah, and the thing that I kind of quite like as well is the reverse engineering of the database.
Right.
And be able to see the entity model, because I've worked with I remember a number of years ago, similar thing. I had a copy of VR Studio and reverse engineered a SQL Server database that we just merged. The company I was working for at the time just merged with this .NET house, and they had this monstrosity of a SQL Server database with hundreds of thousands of tables literally all over the place, and they couldn't work out the wood for the trees. And I literally was able to do this. We took it down to the printers and got it printed out and put it up on the wall in the office. And in the afternoon, they're all just stood around trying to work out where all the different things went. And a picture paints 1,000 words sometimes, and the relationships you just can't see that easily by looking at the metadata just become a lot more visual. And that's a great thing, especially when you're picking up into a new project or something you're just kind of inheriting into.
Yeah, and it's also very helpful too if you're working on migrating as well from other older databases. So if you're moving towards a new database, or you really again just want to upgrade, then it's also a great tool as well. So for all of you migration kind of customers who've seen us work through the migration process, Aqua Data Studio is also a great option as well.
So Alex, Aaron's come back to you. Oh, I'm going to put every time I say your name, my little speaker in the corner thinks I'm saying Alexa, so I've just had to push the button so we don't get disturbed. Aaron's just asked one follow-up question about the REST response. If he's got to merge multiple data sets back together to send a packet back to the server, how easy is that to do? Or is it going to be a case of having to packet the JSON together using the JSON builder?
I believe so, because and even from the server and back to the server, when we have multiple data set adapters or multiple data sets, we might have to do some of it manually. But and especially if we're going to use the automatic database endpoints, those allow us to do certain functionality. If we want to go to a more advanced model, we can of course do some additional code. The demo was focused on how easy it is to do no code, but yeah, of course you can do additional and more complex things once you start writing code.
Yeah, what I'll do, I'll just put a link to a series of blog posts that I wrote on RAD Server back in the chat there for you. And that's looking at master detail relationships and sending those around. So that should hopefully kind of give you an idea about how to get this stuff pushed around. And part of that also included hand coding our own data set responses to be pushed back and forth using the JSON builder. So there's multiple different options available to you to push that around. The other thing you can look at is FireDAC has some amazing components in there for doing update queries and being able to take data sets that have got combined data in them. So you might have the master data with some summary data that's read-only that you're pushing back, and you can still push a data set back and it will then use the update query to be able to pass the data to update the actual data, the master data, as you need to. So even still, you can do that without having to write code, just having to put down extra components and SQL queries. So, some very, very useful stuff in there. We just talk about FireDAC. I'm finding new use cases and ways of doing things with FireDAC, every month, and it's still surprising. There's so much. I thought I'd learned a lot about FireDAC already, but there's just so many different ways to be able to do things with that you don't even immediately think of sometimes, and it's all covered. It's an amazingly powerful set of components. So.
It is.
Okay. Great. A big thank you back for the answers on the questions for those. We'll give you just a moment. So we're just over the top of the hour now. So if there's anything further, then please feel free. We had our email addresses up earlier at the beginning. It's just stephen.ball@embarcadero.com or our just first name last name @embarcadero.com, and we're more than happy to take any questions you have to send through to us, and either connect you up to somebody locally within your region or take them on ourselves. So it's not a problem. Okay, I think unless you can see any more questions there, I think we're through them. Mary, anything that you want to add before we close out here?
No, other than just, if you have access to Architect, just try everything. There's some really great tools that we have added to the Architect edition, and you'll notice the difference yourself in your development.
Yeah, Alex?
No, just to thank everyone for attending our webinar. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yeah, absolutely, and a thank you for the Q&As as well. It's all great fun kind of doing the webinars and getting these recorded out, but without you guys asking some really good, insightful questions, the Q&A would be a bit like us having a cup of tea in a coffee shop and hoping somebody would post something through. So thank you again for the great questions, and there's a whole load of additional events that we've got running at the moment. So please check out the embarcadero.com/events page. We've got a great event coming up next week on Interbase, and there's a few more running, looking at some of the other components and products that are around at the moment. There's another good one looking at web development with TMS and intraweb next week as well. So do keep an eye out on the events page, and thanks very much for attending, and see you all again soon.